about now? Connect stream. There we go. All right, weird. Okay, so cryptography works by doing this. For the stream wasn't working, so the peer reviews are due 1 week from today. You've been randomly assigned one, or you've been assigned 2 people. You only have to do one of the 2. You've been assigned, do it, start a class next week. Okay. And make sure you do the Zybooks. There's the Zybooks reading on this topic and some others right now. Okay. So the way that it works is, let's say that you are person A, and you're in a computer lab. You're sitting next to your friends and all that other stuff, and you want to send a message over the internet to person B. Maybe person B, in this case, was like the computer science department's server. If you're in a computer lab, as we were, everything that you transmit, anybody else in the lab can read. So if we had some woman named Eve, this is traditionally because she's an eavesdropper, get it? So let's say Eve is listening to everything that A sends, right? A gets a copy of everything that A sends to B. Then there's a problem. If the way that this works is you connect to the server, and the server's like, what is your password? What is your username, right? And you type in, my username is Bill. My password is Hunter123. Back in the day, all of this was visible. And so anybody in the computer lab with you could just get your username and get your password, and then they could log in as you, and they could screw with you, which is what something that completely not me would do to my friends. Actually, you might think that screwing with people was some sort of harmful activity. I think probably the funniest thing that I did was when I got the username and password from one of my friends. I went on to internet forums, as in like, well, it was a mailing list, where people were asking all these, high-end computer science questions, and I would just answer questions for him. So I'd give these long, detailed explanations about, how to rasterize a triangle and OpenGL and all this kind of stuff. And all these people would send messages back to my buddy like, wow, what a great explanation. Thank you so much. And he's like, what the hell is going on? I didn't write that, and all these people are like complimenting me. It's wholesome hacking, And, yeah. All right. So what you want is for the username and the password to not be visible to everybody. Does that make sense to you guys? Can you imagine how much damage could be done if, when you connect it to Wells Fargo or Bank of America or whoever you have your millions of dollars in your bank accounts with, that you just typed in your name and password, and everybody between you and them could see your username and password? You guys see how that's problematic? Good thing Facebook is secure. Yeah. How many people's phone numbers did they just leak on the internet? 500 million, something like that. Well, so 550 million. Yeah. So a very simple and bad way of doing encryption is what's called a Caesar cipher. Caesar. I always forget which way is the Caesar cipher. I don't know. I forget which way the A and the E go. But you can substitute one letter for another, right? So A becomes N, B becomes O. This is a very bad way of encrypting things, because if you send out your password that way, anybody who knows that you're using ROT13 for your password can simply use ROT13 to decrypt it. So, for example, if I typed in my password as Hunter123. Then, after I super duper encrypt it using ROT13 by adding 13 to every letter, do you guys see that? So A plus 13 is in, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, right? 13. 13 letters to the right of A is N. And if you got 13 letters to the right of N, I know N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Wait, no. And is not a letter now. Y, Z, A. There you go. And used to be a letter, by the way, in the alphabet. Then you get the letter back. So it's, you know, this is a encryption program. It's a really bad encryption program, but if you ever want to know what your hacker name is, just run it into ROT13. So Bill is OV, you know. Garcia would be Tenev Pin. Avila is Niven. Arius is Nevnif. A friend of mine, Beal, his last name's Beal, so he's Orny. Classic. Yeah, so this encryption program is not much worth anything, right? Other than coming up with your hacker name, right? Because if I were to type in Orny, like what is Orny in under ROT13, I get Beal back, right? So, new player tag. Yeah. Carry is Xneve. Bib is Ovu. That's how you get your hacker name in. Okay, so yeah. The reason why it's called the Caesar cipher is because this was how they encrypted messages back in the days of the Roman Empire. I don't know if Caesar would technically be the Roman Republic then, but anyhow, earliest in theory they did. I don't know if that's actually the case, but yeah, they had different encryption methods in the Roman Empire, and in fact, the reason why the Roman well, I don't know if you guys know the story of Rome versus Hannibal. Have you guys ever heard of that? Hannibal. Most people have heard of Hannibal crossing the Alps with elephants. You know, not the Hannibal that like eats people, Hannibal Lecter, but Hannibal Barca. And yeah, this guy. So Hannibal, in my opinion, is the greatest general to have ever lived. Hannibal put himself number 3, but I actually think he was number 1. Dude was an absolute military genius. Absolute military genius. Was able to just do absolutely incredible things. He invaded the Romans from the north. He was from Carthage, right? And Carthage is like Italy, Sicily, Carthage. He invaded Rome from the north, where they weren't expecting it, with elephants, and proceeded to absolutely obliterate the Roman legions every time they fought, except the very final one. But that's getting ahead of ourselves. So the Romans eventually were like, we can't beat this guy. And so they decided to just like wait him out. And like, they're like, he doesn't have any siege engines. We can't fight this guy. Like the Romans became just terrified of him because Hannibal absolutely massacred 3 entire armies sent by the Romans at Lake Trasimene, at the Battle of the Trivi, and at, of course, Carrhae. Is that how you pronounce it? Anyway, so they decided to wait out Hannibal. They're like, we can't beat him. Dude's unbeatable. Dude is too good. They kept thinking they had him trapped and he would escape, and he just ran up and down the Italian peninsula for 10 years in, you know, Rome's like backyard. He's just running up and down. And Cannae, yeah. One of the biggest defeats that Rome has ever suffered. Um, they had 86,000 men, and 67,000 of them were killed or captured, which is unheard of casualties in the ancient times. And Hannibal lost 10% of his guys. He had an army half as big and absolutely crushed the Romans. Like, dude was an amazing general. And so the Romans, to come to the point, were like, we can't beat him, but he doesn't have siege engines. So as long as he doesn't have siege engines, Rome can't fall. So we're okay. And we'll just, anywhere Hannibal goes, we're just going to build walls around him. Because he doesn't have siege engines, he can't take them out. So Hannibal sends a letter to Carthage being like, hey, bro, like literally his bro, bring siege engines. And so his brother marches across the Alps. Brother never gets any credit for this. But he marched across the Alps with siege engines and comes in from the north. And here's where cryptography comes up. Hannibal sends him a letter being like, hey, or maybe it was the other way around. The brother sends a letter to Hannibal saying, hey, we're here. We're at this location. Come meet up with us. And the Romans intercept it. And the Romans intercept the letter. They did not encrypt it. And the Romans were like, oh, damn, there's another army. That guy is not Hannibal. He's a Barca, but he's not Hannibal. And so they march north. They trap the brother against a river, massacre the second Carthaginian army, chop the head off the brother. They go to Hannibal and just freaking throw his brother's head at them. And he's like, there you go. What you going to do now? And that was Hannibal's really last chance to actually defeat Rome. And so all Hannibal did was he just marched around sacking Rome for 10 years. And then we talk about Scipio Africanus and Battle of Zama. It's a really fascinating story. If you love history, the story of Hannibal is just utterly incredible. It's amazing. So if he had encrypted his emails, though, pretty good chance Carthage would have won. History as we know it would be completely different. No Roman Empire. Holy smokes. What a difference that would make. The Carthaginian system, they had a kind of a senate too. They were kind of corrupt and, I don't know. Yeah. It would have been a completely different beast, because Rome was like the model for a lot of American governance and things like that. Yeah. All because they didn't encrypt their emails. Okay. So, did you do a double 13, rot 26? Yeah, you get the same letter. So what you want is a crypto system. You want a system that will take, so you want A to be able to send some sort of encrypted data to B, and you want B to be able to decrypt it. So if A sends Hunter 123, before it goes out on the internet, you need to turn it into, X, T, Z, I don't know, something. And then B gets that and then decrypts it back into Hunter 123, right? But anything that goes out over the internet, you have to assume that somebody's going to be watching it, right? And to be fair, probably somebody is, right? And that somebody is known as Mr. or Mrs. NSA, right? So the NSA has taps, or they did, who knows what the situation is now, but they had taps, they had wiretaps on every single internet interchange point. So I have a t-shirt that I wear sometimes that has the NSA logo on it, and it's got the American Eagle with its claws in the fiber optic cables. And that is a, reference to that. Some guy was just cleaning up at the Internet Exchange and discovers all these NSA routers tapped into all the data going through the internet. And the NSA routers are sitting there looking for communications that they find interesting. And basically they're just looking at the entire internet. And they're like, oh, they could be programmed so that if, they wanted to see what Brandon was doing, they just, they could punch in, tell me what Brandon's doing. And then every communication coming out of his computer would get tapped and recorded. And depending on how long they wanted to save it for, either for 30 days or indefinitely if they, wanted. And that was what caused the internet. That mass surveillance of Americans is why Edward Snowden blew the whistle. Arguably, some people said he violated his oath. We could probably have a lecture on Snowden at some point. But that was why he blew the whistle on these activities, because James Clapper, went in front of the Senate Oversight Committee, who's responsible for overseeing the intelligence community, and said, no, there is no mass surveillance of Americans. And so Snowden's like, no, there is. And so he blew the whistle on it and has been living not in America ever since, because they would arrest him and throw him in jail for revealing state secrets. So, yay. Anyway, so what you want is anything that goes over the internet, you want to encrypt. And then whenever it gets to the target destination, they need to be able to decrypt it. All right, so there's a lot of different crypto systems. A crypto system is a way of encrypting and decrypting data. The Caesar cipher that I talked about from the Roman days is a very basic one. Anybody can decrypt it. You just run ROT 13, and you can decrypt it. All right. But in the 1970s, at MIT, these really, really smart dudes named Ravesh, Shamir, and Adelman made a algorithm called RSA, based on their names, right? And they came up with a crypto system that you could publish the crypto system. Everybody knows RSA. If you take discrete math with me, I will teach you how RSA works. It basically involves using exponentiation and modulus. So like, 5 to the third power modulus 7. Modulus is the remainder operator, so 5 to the third is 125. 7 divides into 125. Why did I make this hard on myself? 57 times with a remainder of 6. So the remainder is 6. So that, basically this, what's called an EXP modulus, exponentiation modulus, the actual math, it's an entire lecture on how that works. But the point is that it's actually very easy to encrypt and decrypt something using RSA. But if somebody doesn't have the what are called the private keys, decrypting it is very difficult. So basically, a person will publish publicly. They'll publish what's called a public key, and they'll publish a public key, which is basically a number named E, and they keep a private key called D, and they publish this. And these two things are mathematically related, and so these are generated by let's say that Garcia wants, he's a famous journalist, and he wants people to be able to contact him, right? So he generates, he does some math, and by math I mean you click on a program and the program will make it for you, and this program will generate for you a public key and a private key, and you just publish this online. So you just go on your website and you're like, hey, if you ever want to contact me, here's my public key. And then Chase online. So if you want to contact Dr. Stallman, who's the guy that founded GNU and Free Software Foundation, old key, new key. So he publishes a public key, and you use the public key to encrypt a message. And what you do is, if so he's published his public key, but Stallman has kept his private key secret. Okay, and so what happens is let's say Garcia. So let's say Garcia wants to send a message to Stallman. He uses Stallman's public key. And then he transmits this thing encrypted to Stallman. And because Stallman has his private key kept secret, then he can get the email back. And then if Stallman wants to mail Garcia, he grabs Garcia's public key and he sends it back that way. Garcia's he encrypts it using that, and then Garcia can get the email back. And so what the upshot of this is that you can email each other on the internet without anybody being able to read it except for people that have a copy of the private key. And that's a really powerful system. And if you have ever been to like online banking or looks like a class? What do you mean looks like a class? So if you've ever been to, I don't know, you know, Google. It's actually encrypted. So by and large these days, most things that you do on the internet, if you have your system set up right, which most I think are by default now, it's going to be secured. So if you ever see HTTPS, that means that is a secured connection. If you, yeah, see if I just try doing a boring old HTTP www.google.com, like don't give me an encrypted connection, it actually will give me the encrypted connection anyway. Okay, which is good. And so if I search for where does Babby come from, right? Then you can see up here that S right there. That means that nobody else on the internet can tell that I am transmitting to and from know your meme about how Babby is formed, right? And that's Babby formed. How is Babby formed? How a girl get pregnant? It's turned into a giant internet meme. So that by itself isn't good enough because people will still know what host you're talking to, right? And so they would still know you're talking to knowyourmeme.com, but they wouldn't know what you're transmitting to and from them. Okay. And so if you want to hide who you are talking to, which host you're talking to, then you need to get a VPN connection. Speaking of which, this message is brought to you by NordVPN. I'm kidding. I'm not actually sponsored, and it'd be very weird for it to be sponsored, but I do actually use NordVPN because they had some ridiculously good deal for like it was like 2 years for like $20 or I don't know, something like utterly ridiculously cheap. And so I'm like, all right, fine. Even though I hate all those NordVPN adverts they put everywhere. So what's happening here is it connects from me to this server, and then I connect out from that, and it's encrypted. Everything I do is encrypted, and so my ISP has no idea who I'm talking to. My ISP cannot spy on me, which it does. My ISP is AT&T, and they do spy on you. And then that's not like even a hypothetical NSA level thing, because at a certain point it's like, yeah, you know, if the NSA wants to find out what you're doing, they could probably figure it out. No, it's just more like, you know, they will send you copyright violation notices if you do the wrong thing on the internet and pirate the interwebs. They will actually cancel your internet service if you do so. And so, yeah, if you VPN out, they have no idea what you're doing. Okay. Why did you choose NordVPN over the other VPNs? I don't think it's better. Like I said, there was just some ridiculously cheap offer on Black Friday. So I'm like, all right, fine. You know, I feel a little dirty doing it just because I'm so annoyed by the NordVPN sponsored ads on YouTube. Which ironically, I guess this is, but it's not. I'm not sponsored by NordVPN. Anyway, yeah, so if you torrent things, your ISP will notice and send you an angry letter. And if you get 3 strikes, they will turn off your internet. And good luck surviving a pandemic without internet, right? And so if you put on a VPN, though, they can't tell. Okay. For sure, and didn't use LimeWire. Never, nope, not me. Yeah. Raid Shadow Legends. Raycons, yeah. Drives me crazy. Anyway, so yeah, and so with a VPN and with and if I encrypt my communications, then the company that makes the VPN, they can't tell what I'm doing either. The company that makes the VPN, NordVPN in this case, would know that I'm connecting to knowyourmeme.com, but they don't know what I'm sending to them. And so it's an extra layer of protection. In theory, the NordVPN could be logging every website I visit, and so you still want to encrypt your connection through the VPN anyway. But the VPN will encrypt all the communications coming out of your computer so that your ISP can't spy on you, okay. Which they do. Yep. So does this make sense to you guys that you publish a public key and one person uses the public, like if I want to contact Stallman, I could grab his public key and send him an email. I take my email, I encrypt it using his public key, and I send it to him, and then when he receives it, he uses his private key to decrypt it. And as long as he doesn't lose his private key, then everything works fine. If somebody gets a copy of his private key, well, then they can read everything that he does, right? And that's a problem, right? Because it's like, where do you keep your private key? I used to carry my private key here on this USB drive. And so I would, back in the before times when we'd be in person, I would carry this in with me, plug it into the USB at work, and that would allow me to read and write emails using my private key. Now the trouble is, well, there's two troubles. One, how do you know the computer at work isn't compromised, right? It's sitting in a computer lab around computer science people all day. There's a pretty good chance that somebody could have rooted it, right? And so when I plug it in, they could have a very small program on there that would simply copy my private key off. You know what I mean? And there you go. And I would have no idea that it's been compromised. And yeah. And problem two is that I would leave the thing in the computer, right? Class is over. All right, see you guys. There's another class coming, and I walk out and I leave this thing behind. I did that like 5 or 6 times, and I'm finally like, yeah, I can't trust this anymore. Like, who knows where it went. So cryptography is making your stuff secret so the internet can't see it. Exactly. Because if people can see it, they can mess with you. If somebody can read your name and password, Leslie, then they can log in as you on wellsfargo.com, or bankofamerica.com. Be like, set up a transfer to, me, and suck your money out, right? Internet fraud is a really big, pervasive problem. I've had multiple friends get identity theft. If that's a word. Identity thefted. Or victims of identity fraud. And so what happened was the identity thief got a copy of their credentials somehow. With one of my friends, they did so by stealing his mail. Right? We have mailbox thieves in my neighborhood. Like, in fact, a couple nights ago, I saw there's this car that I've seen over and over again. They just sort of, at 2 o'clock in the morning, they slowly drive around, and I'm pretty sure they're mailbox thieves. And, you reach into somebody's mailbox, you take their stuff out. If they've got a check, well, okay, now you've got their name, you got their address, you got their bank account number, right? And so even public mailboxes, like, they'll put gum on the inside of it. So when people mail things, it'll stick to the gum. They reach in and they pull the letter out, and they will take your check, and they will attempt to cash it for them, and then they will create fake checks and make fake checks and cash. Like for him, he was apparently paying this person, this identity fraudster, for babysitting services. And so they were just cashing checks for like $100, $200 every week for babysitting. Flew under the bank's fraud radar until he noticed, like, a couple months later, all these checks had been drawn on his account. And 2 a.m. is too early to sleep, I know. Yeah. And so, same thing on the internet. If your credentials get stolen, people can log in as you. They same guy actually got frauded twice. They got his brokerage information, where dude's a millionaire, and so they contacted, I think, Merrill Lynch, his brokerage, and were trying to steal millions of dollars from him. And they're like, oh, okay. They just called up like, hey, this is so and so. Here's my name. Here's my address. Here's my bank account information. And they're like, all right, what do you want to do? I want to transfer some money, And so, yeah, it's a really big problem. And so you want all your stuff on the internet to be encrypted. Okay. And so nowadays, most stuff you do in a browser will automatically get encrypted for you, and you don't even need to do anything about it in most cases. But if you're curious, then you can just look at that S right there. That's HTTP secure. That means the connection is encrypted to and from the server. But you'll probably want to use a VPN also on top of that, okay? So that, like for example, when Stallman was at my house, he used a VPN to connect out, and I gave him the Wi-Fi password here, and then he connected to my Wi-Fi, and then VPN'd out, so that the government, who he assumes tracks his location at all times, wouldn't be able to know it was him at my house. Maybe a good thing. I don't know. And so he connects out, and all of his communications he does is through the VPN. And I actually have Stallman's personal public key. So he has one public key that he publishes to the world, and then for people he likes, like me, he gave me a business card with his personal public key on it. So it goes into a different mailbox with his friends, and it's kind of cool. I've never mailed him. Kind of, I don't know what I'd say. Hey, dude, thanks for coming. It's fun. You should come out sometime. Actually, I did tell him that. He's like, yeah, I'm probably not going to come back to Fresno. Is literally what he told me. Not because it's bad. He's like, the only reason I'd come back to Fresno is to give a talk, again. So it's like, I have no, the dude, yeah, social skills aren't the best, but so yeah, I have no reason to come back to Fresno unless it's to give another talk. All right, I'll invite you out for another talk then someday. Tell him to play Raid Shadow Legends. Okay. So, what do you guys think the pros and cons are? Remember, when you're a critical thinker, you need to weigh the pros and cons. And again, people who aren't critical thinkers think that if you say any pros at all about something, then you're 100% on it. And if you say any cons at all, you're 100% on it. It's not the case. If you want to be a critical thinker, you have to deal with nuance. You have to deal with relative weights and things like that. So what are the benefits of cryptography? Like, what are the benefits of, basically most people in America using cryptography these days, even without knowing it? What are the cons? What is the downside to the government? What is the downside of the government not being able to, see what you send in an email? What's that? Your data can be safe, but it'll never be fully safe. Is that a pro? Is that a con? Like, what is it good? Is it bad? I'm asking you guys to weigh the relative merits. Like, what is the relative merits? What kinds of problems can cryptography cause? The government certainly opposed cryptography for a long time and still kind of do. Maybe it'll help you identify any problems or distress signals you send out. If you call 911, that should work, right? But I don't know who you'd email if you're in distress. If you're lost up in the Kings Canyon or something, you got cell service somehow under a miracle, you're like, who do you email to help? Forest Service? Mail the Forest Service, like, help. Broke my leg. I don't know. You get kidnapped? Yeah, who do you email? You get kidnapped. You're like, who do you email? Help@FBI.com? I don't know. And even if you had cryptography, that wouldn't change anything, right? Because you could send an encrypted email to the FBI, presumably. I don't know what email address you'd use. Cons, you get some privacy, but it adds work to the communication process. That is true. Cryptography is reasonably fast, but it's not perfectly fast. And so, yeah, you are going to pay an overhead for encrypting all of your communications. True story. Yeah, that'd definitely be a con, right? It will slow you down a little bit, you know. It's not, freedom ain't free. Freedom ain't free. Con is that cryptography comes at a cost. I mean, that's true. I don't know if you guys got that reference. It's Team America. Yeah. Have you guys ever seen Team America? Doesn't matter. Pros: privacy and protection, right? Privacy and protection. Trustworthy, secure. Cons, yeah, cons. You know, you can invisibly be vulnerable. And that's a good point, right? Like if you think that you're secure, like you might say things that you wouldn't otherwise say. You know what I mean? Whereas when you know that everything you're typing is visible on the internet, like, you know, you'd probably be a little bit more circumspect about your communications, right? I've never bought drugs in my life, but I have friends that do, you know, and so whenever they're communicating on Discord, they're like, "Would you like to meet up at the park to discuss a trade?" You know, like they never, you know, because they just assume that everything on Discord is being observed and recorded by someone, right? And so they just will, if you assume that the NSA is watching everything you say, then you can be a little bit more circumspect about what you're saying. Whereas, yeah, if you think my encryption is perfect, then be like, "Yo, man, want to get some weed?" And then, you know. All right. Privacy and protection. So what else? Cons: the cryptography comes at a cost. Yeah, sure it can. Like a VPN costs money, right? For a VPN, definitely. Yeah, free VPNs. Yeah, they all have bandwidth limits and things like that. It's not very good. Some VPNs are owned by foreign governments. Some VPNs are honeypots, right? So a foreign government could be like, "Use our VPN, it's free." And then people use it, and because you're going through their VPN, they now know all of your internet, you know, history, and you still want to encrypt your stuff on top of the VPN. Like I said, there's no guarantee that your VPN will be trustworthy, right? A honeypot is when you set up a trap for somebody, right? Because it's from the concept you set out a pot of honey, Pooh Bear, and then flies will come by and land and then get stuck, right? And so you set up a free VPN, and then all these people who want to do illegal activities will come in and land in your honeypot, right? Because it's free, you know. So, yeah, that there's definitely that. I actually don't know who owns NordVPN. Like I said, I don't particularly trust them, and I don't like their internet ads on YouTube and things like that. But like I said, the price was so good, I fell right into that honeypot. If it is a honeypot, I don't know if it is or isn't. Right? I did a cursory Google search. You know, that's about it. I hope they like to listen to lo-fi for 10 hours every day. It's a person with headphones on turning some pages. You know? So yeah, so some people think they have nothing to hide. You know, if I have nothing to hide, I don't need encryption. And to which I would respond, the words of Cardinal Richelieu. If you guys know The Three Musketeers, the book The Three Musketeers by Dumas, the villain of the book is Cardinal Richelieu. In real life, he wasn't a villain, I guess. I don't know. Like, the dude was interesting, you know, and was a power broker and stuff like that. But, you know, the way he's kind of caricatured in Three Musketeers is a little bit extreme. But anyway, he said, "If you give me 5 words written by the hand of an honest man, I can get them to hang," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But basically, I could take you know, let's see what we have here. Um, like a person in my class just said, it'll make it harder for the government to know what you're doing. They'd say it's for national security. Well, clearly, that individual has something to hide and is working against our national security because they're dubious of our attempts to secure the nation's security. And so we should bring them in for questioning just to make sure they're not working against the United States of America. That kind of stuff, right? And so basically almost anything you say can be taken out of context and can be used as a pretense for hauling you in, right? And so when you encrypt your communications, then that cuts down on your exposure to that. And so it lowers your exposure, right? Of course, and of course I'm saying all of this on YouTube on a public channel, you know, but it's fine. I don't think anything I've said has been too bad, right? Government, don't arrest me. Okay. So, yes, and so a big downside, and this is the reason that the government uses to fight cryptography is that they say it hurts national security, right? So the government argues that having cryptography lowers national security, right? Because terrorists can plan terrorist attacks securely with the government having no ability to read their communications. Hey man, let's go blow up the bank tomorrow. All right. You know, if the government can't spy on you to do that, then you are more vulnerable to terrorism. And so the argument that is always made against cryptography is national security interests, right? In Russia, Russia wants to have a copy of all of your private keys. America tried that repeatedly to pass legislation like, sure, you can encrypt everything, but the government needs a backdoor into your communications. The trouble with that is that once anybody compromises the government's database of everyone's public keys, now the entire internet is not secure. And any communications you've done previously to your bank are now public because your private key has been grabbed and they could go back in time and decrypt your communications with your bank. And there's your name, there's your password, and they could commit fraud on a national level. And so, a lot of people will argue that it increases national security, right? Especially since there are state level actors like the Mossad and the Red Army of China that are actively hacking, American governments and businesses. A big part of, the reason why Nortel is not around anymore is because the Chinese hacked them and stole their trade secrets, and now there's no more Nortel. It used to be one of the biggest telecom communication companies in the world, and they're no longer in business, right? Like they were basically hacked out of existence. And so it was a big Canadian company, right? And they don't exist anymore. And so your national security or your national interests are protected by encryption, right? And so there is economic warfare that takes place between countries. And countries trying to get edges on each other to steal each other's trade secrets and things like that is a real thing. So there's a good book. I think it's called Cyber Spies. I have it. Yeah, there's by Gordon something or other. That talks about all these clandestine James Bond level, activities that are actually real. Right? They're actually real. Could there be corruptions in encryption of data? Yeah. So yeah, that's a good con, right? You can lose your data. Right? Did you hear about these people that had Bitcoin and then they lost their password to it? And so they have like millions of dollars in Bitcoin and they just can't get at it because they forgot their password, right? So, it's like, yeah, that's a problem, But at the same time, like if you don't encrypt it, then somebody's going to be able to steal it, so. Some dude offered millions for somebody to crack his password. Yeah, it's like, oof. Capital O-O-F. Oof. Yeah, write that password down on a piece of paper, man. I know it's not secure, but the odds of somebody breaking into your house and, looking underneath your, operating system's textbook and finding your I don't actually write my passwords down, but If I had millions of dollars of Bitcoin, I would certainly have a backup of that, you know. So, um, yeah, yeah. But the big argument in cryptography is personal liberty, right? Like the big pro is liberty, right? The notion that, yeah, the government shouldn't have the ability to read everything you write online, right? That's, we don't talk about liberty very much, because it's all national security or economic interests and things like that. But, if you are a believer in natural rights theory, again, all these theories we talked about at the beginning of the semester, talk about them all semester long. If you believe in natural rights theory, then humanity has a right to liberty. They have a right to not be spied on, right? And so the government's argument that they need to be able to spy on everybody to make us safe doesn't work. It's a violation of human liberty. So, without a warrant especially, right? In America, the trade-off we make between security and liberty is if you want to violate somebody's liberty, you need to have a judge look at the government's argument and be like, okay, yeah, so somebody overheard Al Capone saying he's going to rob a bank. All right, that's good enough for a warrant. You can wiretap him, right? But the government right now wiretaps everybody without a warrant. Yay, warrantless wiretapping, and then all the citizens are like, nope, encrypt everything, and it's like this, all or nothing kind of system where like government either can't do anything or they do everything, and that traditional balance where like the government has to ask for a wiretap is basically kind of out the window. I mean, it's still there, and warrants are still a thing, but if you cross the border, the government has claimed it has the right to search digitally all of your properties. They can search your phone, you search your laptop. If you don't provide them with the password to your phone or laptop, they can seize it on the presumption you have something to hide, right? And this applies within 100 miles of any U.S. border, which is where like 90%, I don't know what percent, but like a lot of the American population lives within some border, East Coast, West Coast, Canadian border, Mexican border. On the edges is where most of America lives. So, 1984, yeah, I mean, 1984 is a book of fiction, right? But if you want to read what's actually going on, the book is called Cyber Spies by Gordon something or other. Paul Gordon. Okay. Gordon Carrera. Okay. So, yeah, and that'll tell you kind of what the current state of the hacks are and what the trade-offs are, what's going on. Huawei, right? Huawei routers are kind of banned in America. In the UK, they allow them, but in order for them to allow Huawei to sell a router in America, they have to provide all of their source code, and Huawei doesn't want their source code to be stolen. So what they do is they have this vault set up in England with two doors on it. One can be opened by the UK government, one by Huawei, with these like 12-inch thick steel doors, and both people have to open it, and then they allow people in with new recording devices to go in there, and they tear apart the routers looking for any spy stuff, and they go through all the lines of source code looking for any spy stuff, and when they don't find anything, then they authorize that router. No firmware updates, bro, but that router is now updated or now on the allowed list, and they will allow it to be used. So that's how the UK handled the Huawei situation. In America, especially under Trump, it was just like, nope, nothing by Huawei in our infrastructure. So different countries have different takes on it, stuff like that. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting subject. Okay, so that's it for today, guys, and I hope you learned a little something today. I hope you gained some insight on the workings of the interwebs, about how communications are protected, the trade-offs in the debate. Everything's got pros and cons. Everything's got pros and cons, and so no situation I've seen it's complicated at all. is all one way or the other, you know. So, how much time do you have for the midterm? It'll be the same as before. Like basically the midterm format is going to be the same as the last one. So, yep. Should have plenty of time. We'll talk about. Yeah, we'll talk about all that on Wednesday. Wednesday we'll go over. We'll go over the midterm then. Okay. Are we having a sample midterm? Sure. Yeah, I could probably put one up right now, I guess. Sure. Is that book's due on Friday? Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. I don't remember due dates off the top of my head. That's what Canvas is for. All right. I'll see you guys.